I want to thank off the top Bonafide Health. Bonafide was a gold sponsor of the very first Hot Flash Inc. Summit. Bonafide provides novel, safe, effective, and research-backed solutions for women's health, from hot flashes and vaginal dryness to mood and skin changes. Bonafide is working to set a new standard for menopause care by bringing their trusted, evidence-backed options to the retail aisle nationwide in the U.S. at Target. Bonafide is providing millions of women with more access to science-backed solutions. To learn more, visit hellobonafide.com and be sure to use code SUMMIT20 to receive 20% off the first month of any Bonafide subscription product. Thanks again, Bonafide. I really appreciate it.
I'm Ann Marie McQueen, journalist and proud 50-ish woman, and we are here looking for the true truth in perimenopause, menopause, midlife, and beyond.
Opening our minds to other possibilities is not always easy.
Hot Flash Inc.
You're all woman to me. All right, Ann Marie.
Welcome to the Hot Flash Inc. podcast. I'm your host, Ann Marie McQueen, founder of Hot Flash Inc. I have some podcasts coming up, some interviews. They're really good, but I thought I would just do a solo episode today and let you know a few things that are going on. So what I'm thinking of is how many incorrect things are said these days. And this is enough to drive me around a bend. It makes me absolutely batty. And I'm going to give you just a few examples. I am just so careful with what I say, and I'm not saying I can't be wrong, because I absolutely can be. But I'd had 30, when did I go to journalism school? 1994 to 1996. So I've had since 1994 of being absolutely terrified about getting things wrong. And if you haven't lived that, I know we all don't want to make mistakes, but some people don't have the same fear. For example, I'm working on a contract right now, and I have to file my invoice every month. And I just wasn't getting paid for last month. And I went to inquire about it. And the person who had to process my payment said she missed my email. She missed the email, and her job is to process a payment. And then she said, okay, I'll rush it through. And so I went to check with her, and she said, I'll send an email. And it turns out she sent the email to the wrong person. So I'm just saying that in journalism, you have to be very, 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 very careful about not making a mistake in what you say, in the information you provide, and in how you execute things. Obviously, there's fields that are way more important in your execution, like flying a plane and doing an operation on a human. But I just feel like other people aren't as careful. I'm going to give you some examples. So I was on this panel. I'm going to put the panel. It was a pro-aging panel. Okay. And I was on this panel. And when they went to introduce me, the woman who was the MC for the day was this very glamorous woman. And I noticed before the panel, she was only interested in speaking to the famous person who was on the panel. That's not me. And so she's introducing me. And first of all, I really messed up because you're supposed to wait until they finish introducing you. And then you go on the stage while everyone's clapping. Everyone knows that. But for some reason, my brain, she was still introducing me, and I thought she must be done soon. And I'm such a people pleaser that I'm like, I better not be late. My whole body just started carrying me onto the stage. And she was still introducing me for a long time. So I actually sat in my chair. And this is when she said the last two things of the introduction was great. It was the information I provided, my bio. The last two things she said, one was her podcast has 1 million downloads. And she's an advisor to the World Health Organization for women's health. And my head just wibbles to the right. And I look at her because I have the video for this, because both of those things aren't even close to being true. I mean, my podcast has almost 200,000 downloads. That's pretty good when you think about almost 200,000 people have listened to this podcast. I mean, I don't want to cast aspersions, but I'm just guessing that she zhuzhed up my bio by running it through AI, or, zhuzhed up her script by running it through AI, and it just added a bunch of stuff that wasn't true, which AI does all the time. That makes me crazy. What am I supposed to do? Issue a correction from the stage to the 200 people that are in the audience? I just feel like now 200 people now think I advise the World Health Organization. I have 1 million downloads of my podcast. I guess some people will be very, very happy about this mistake, but I am not. You know the feeling when you tried all your health trends, but you're still tired, foggy, or just not yourself? It's not your fault. True health starts deeper at the cellular level. Enter the first ever longevity gummies powered by MitoPure. They're the only clinically proven urocylin A gummies designed to recharge your cells, boost energy, and help you feel strong and vibrant from the inside out. They taste great. I've tried them. They're vegan and clean. And MitoCure's own testing shows they can add up to 12% more muscle strength in just 16 weeks. It's like giving your body a daily cellular tune-up. If you want to feel energized now and as you age, click the link to timeline.com in the show notes and use my code HOTFLASH for 20% off your first order. That's timeline.com and code HOTFLASH for 20% off your first order. I was just on a panel a little bit ago with some people from India, this part of the world, and there's a woman in Oman, and she was talking about how in Arabic, menopause was the age of despair, and then feminists got together and changed it to the age of hope, age of renewal. And that part's true. The part that's true is that it was changed from the age of despair to the age of renewal. I'm very well acquainted with this because it came from an ad from a company called Tenna that makes a whole bunch of products, including incontinence pads. And Tenna started this campaign to change the age of despair to something else, and then they came up with the age of renewal. It's a pretty big point. And I didn't want to correct this woman who's older saying that it's feminist, because these are the kind of things. Do you remember Stephen Colbert and his truthiness? Like, this is where it's like, that sounds right. But to me, it's important that it was a campaign. And why I like to say that it's a campaign when it is a campaign is because so much in menopause now is being done by companies, and people are just treating it like it's just an organic, genuine expression rather than something that the company is doing to get attention for their product. And I'm talking about white papers. I'm talking about research and surveys. I'm talking about podcasts that they do and events that they sponsor. I'm just campaigns that they start. It's all very important that we understand that these are commercially driven, I think. And very rarely do we come across anything that's organic. And so that really ends up bugging me. And then the other thing I saw that drove me nuts was a doctor I very much respect, who is a researcher, who has been on my podcast, who made a post about not needing progesterone after you go through surgical menopause, because progesterone is taken after surgical menopause to protect your uterus. And I know that to her, this is true, because that's what in mainstream medicine, ob-gyne, that's what you're taught progesterone or progestin is for. But you walk into the hysterectomy, partial or full, with all your hormones. And do we really think that progesterone does nothing else but protect the lining of the uterus? Are you kidding me? It has protective benefits from the top of our head to our toes. And so to see someone speaking with such authority, who is an authority, so unaware that progesterone would have other benefits other than protecting the uterus, and telling women that they don't need to worry about it if they're not on progesterone, because that's all progesterone's for. These are the things that keep me up at night and are turning me into a lunatic. So anyway, I wanted to talk about something else this week. I wanted to talk about perimenopause and ADHD. You're hearing about perimenopause and ADHD, and of course, ADHD is taken all over everything. And there is a huge dovetailing here of ADHD and perimenopause. And the hormonal fluctuations around puberty, the menstrual cycle, pregnancy, perimenopause, and menopause do appear to influence ADHD symptoms in women. So you have the estrogen and progesterone shifts. Those are linked to changes in the neurotransmitters, dopamine and norepinephrine. And those things matter for attention, executive function, and impulse control. And we have research that in female ADHD, women may have an increased risk for perimenopausal symptoms, including sleep problems, anxiety, depression, and decline of executive function. There is also the situation where people who had no idea that they had ADHD and may have masked it for a long time experience such profound changes during perimenopause that they have to start looking at the fact that they might have ADHD. A study at King's College London found that for all women studied, higher ADHD trait levels were associated with more menopausal complaints, even if a formal ADHD diagnosis wasn't present. And an article from Attitude magazine, they serve ADHD readers, reports that women say their ADHD symptoms were exacerbated during menopause. Or, as I just said, that perimenopause triggered recognition of underlying ADHD. And it's really difficult to untangle this because is it just midlife hormonal changes, or is it a flare up or an appearance of ADHD where perhaps someone wasn't aware? And this overlap of cognitive symptoms and the brain neurotransmitter interaction with ADHD it's just really interesting to me. And it's just not clear how much ADHD symptoms worsen because of menopause versus how much women with undiagnosed ADHD are simply reaching a tipping point in life. It's all just very much like we need to study it more. And I'm like you, where maybe I'm of the mind that I see a lot of like medicalization of everything out there. And I don't want to, for women in midlife, perimenopausal, or who suspect they have ADHD, the perimenopause phase may bring increased challenges. Usual coping mechanisms and strategies may slip. There's more brain fog, disorganization, memory issues, mood swing. If you've never had an ADHD diagnosis, but you're finding it particularly challenging, you could ask, could this be ADHD? Especially if you start thinking about your earlier life and you start realizing that some symptoms you had when you were younger could have been ADHD. And this is what happened to me because in my 40s, I had a friend who was diagnosed with ADHD when she was a teenager. And she said to me, I think you have ADHD, except that you're very, very organized. We both worked at a newspaper and I was the features editor. And she said, you run it like I would never be able to run it like that. But it was when I left the newspaper and I became a freelancer that it really all blew apart. But this was also in my late 40s when perimenopause was in full swing. So I started to think back, like it took me many years to accept that this might be what's going on. I just remember saying, I can't get organized. I can't get organized. I can't get organized. I feel like I've really actually never been organized since then. Although you'd argue to run this platform, I have to be, and also I've been working full time. I have to be pretty organized. And I sort of started to look at, I've looked at those accounts for ADHD and there's a lot of things resonate with me. The internal hyperactivity and the inner chaos that I felt in my life, the overthinking, my gosh, the overthinking and the rumination, the racing thoughts. I've realized in my life that sometimes I just get a thought, good or bad, and I just it's a loop. Like, it's like almost like I'm soothing myself with the thought. It happens all the time. It might have been like if I went on a nice date, I would just replay the date over and over and over and over. Or something bad happened and I just replay it over and over and over. It happened to me last night because I started to think, oh, I could take my Bitcoin and leverage it with one of these new companies and I could withdraw money and buy more Bitcoin. And then I thought about it obsessively for like the next 14 hours. Some of the somatic complaints, the nervous system dysregulation, the hormonal sensitivity, like jaw tension, body tension, neck, chronic pain. I've had those digestive issues, disordered eating. I had a binge eating problem probably from age 8 or 9 until about 30. And then in this current contract, I'm working for a museum that's opening and I was editing their accessibility policy. And that's when I started to realize that I also have sensory sensitivities, major ones. Like the office I'm working in is so overpoweringly scented that it makes me feel ill like many days. And the girls there are local and they'll burn incense that makes me feel literally sick. And then I remember back to my childhood, like crowds, noise, lights. I remember having to leave malls with my mom. I remember my mom often she'd take me to get a Coke. There's so many other things like the rejection sensitivity. That's the craziest one to me. I didn't know that might actually be a symptom of ADHD. And then I have huge hyperfocus, rapid idea generation. I'm impulsive and resisting structure, but craving freedom. All of these things are things that are through lines in my life, and not just things I started to feel in my 40s. And one thing I've realized is I have met women that have got an ADHD diagnosis. There's been a couple that I've known here in the UAE, and I have found them extremely taxing. Both of them got their diagnosis after their child got their diagnosis. And one of them I worked with, and it was really taxing for me because I felt like I had most of the same things, but like literally everything they blamed on ADHD. And I don't want to be that person. And after I realized at the museum that I might have some of these sensory issues, I started thinking, do I want to get this diagnosis? It's like a full day and it's very expensive. And I just can't, like, of all the things I want to do that I can't get to, it's just not there. And I don't really know that I need it because when I have done so much work on my nervous system, I've done breath work and somatic work and all these different healing things. And I just the acceptance and understanding is very, very important to me. And it's been transformative into how I contain myself and conduct myself. And I have actually overcome like many of the issues. And so I don't know, would I want to take medication? I don't think so. When I'm most off the rails is when I'm most off the rails in most areas, right? Like I'm not getting sunlight and walking and meditating and being calm. So I can't always do those things. I haven't been eating well. Food is a very big trigger for me. So I guess I don't know what I'm trying to say, but one thing that I have realized is that I've started to acknowledge that I lived with this for a very long time. And even though I'm shedding so much of this pain and trauma, and Gabor Mate talks about this, that ADHD is basically childhood trauma, and that's how it changes your brain. I have the most compassion for myself when I was little because I was the high achieving kid. Look, I mean, I had a terrible time sitting still. I had a terrible time in school. I got great grades, but I would always learn. I had a terrible time sitting in class. In university, I literally barely ever paid attention in class. I was always doing something else, and then I would learn it later. And in fourth year university, I actually got a job at a steakhouse in the middle of the day in fourth year university. And I got all A's, and I worked during the day, and I learned all my courses, usually like a couple days before the exam. Of all the things I've gone through, since perimenopause hit and I sort of fell apart, I don't think getting a diagnosis and becoming a person who has ADHD is something that I want to do. But I have all the compassion for people who do want to do it or who have gone through what I've gone through. And I have all the compassion for people who are having the worsening cognitive symptoms, because I will tell you that it's not just like get organized. Like I just can't. And my bestie, who had a very similar childhood to me, has very similar levels of ADHD. We also are incredibly sensitive. And that includes sensitive to other people's moods and picking up things that other people don't pick up. And I don't really think I would want to be any different. But I know one thing that super pisses me off. And I was just on a panel where it happened again. I went to a workshop on crypto a couple of weeks ago, and it happened. And it happens when I confide in friends or even family members. Hey, I think I might have had or have this neurodivergence, you know? Like it explains a lot in me. Explains why I will work until I almost pee my pants. And I'll want to like finish the thing before I can go to the bathroom. Why I can sit down and work. How I have launched Hot Flash and worked and built it into this with just me. And then I added Astrid, who helps me like 2 years ago. But like the obsession that I've had with this, it's not normal. Although what is normal? What pisses me off is when you confide in someone, hey, I think I have this in my brain. And they say, well, everyone has it. It's so hurtful to me. I don't want to show you my ADHD diagnosis. I'm not even getting one. But if a person confides in you that they feel that their life has been a certain kind of way and that they've had a certain kind of pain from something, I think the very last thing you want to do is say, bah, everyone's got that. Like that sucks. That's a shitty thing to do to someone. And I don't know why people do it. I think they're sick of seeing ADHD and they don't understand it. but I don't think everyone has ADHD. I don't. So if you're experiencing this, please, let me know. Let me know what it's been like for you. I do know that hormone therapy can help. And one of the podcasts that I would encourage you to go back and listen to is Dr. Angela DeRosa, because she talks about testosterone and how helpful testosterone can be for executive function. And executive function is what goes in perimenopause. This is why I couldn't organize myself and still feel like everything's in a shambles in a way. I have been working 2 full-time jobs, but, uh, you know, for all the claims that are being made about testosterone, and there are a lot of them, I think this one is overlooked. And Dr. DeRosa has worked with testosterone for a long time, and she was in the worked on the early trials of Intrinsa, the patch that did not get approved in 2004 in the wake of the Women's Health Initiative. And I believe her when she says that. I don't really know what to say to you. I just want to say that if you have ADHD, it doesn't disappear at midlife. We carry it, and maybe we're undiagnosed, and maybe we've been masking, and that's exhausting. And I've been doing that too, masking the internal chaos that's in my brain. These are major hormonal and neurochemical shifts, and it can make everything worse. And it's real. And I would encourage you to find a doctor who can help you unpack what is next and help you treat both. The evidence is still emerging. We don't have really large longitudinal studies yet. There's not clear clinical guidelines for ADHD in the menopause transition. So, awareness and integration of your care is key. And if you're struggling, just consider that multiple systems might be involved, hormones and neurodivergence. And like me, you may need a holistic approach that can work really on that nervous system. And for anyone struggling in perimenopause, that's going to help. And then just from my experience, I really encourage you to be careful who you confide in, because for some reason, people like to invalidate what you're saying when it's emotional, because I think that a lot of people can't handle their own emotions. And so they don't really appreciate it when people are being vulnerable with them. And that's just a sad case, but true. But these can be people who are very close to us. So like everything else, we need a lot more research. We need to know about the prevalence. We need to know about how hormone therapy works. We need brain imaging. Is there a difference in ADHD medications during perimenopause or menopause? Uh, we need to know more about the lived experience. I know one of the things that was really nice at the museum was the woman who runs the accessibility program. She has a brother who's autistic. And I don't know why, but I just decided to confide in her that I had realized that perhaps I had some neurodivergence while I was editing the accessibility policy. And she said, "You've made me so happy for saying this. You don't know how happy you've made me." And she said, "Maybe you want to wear the sunflower," because they have these sunflowers for hidden disabilities. When you go in the museum, you'll see someone wearing it in their lanyard. And if you have a hidden disability, you can get help from them. But also, if you wear this sunflower, it means you've got a hidden disability. And she offered me a sunflower, and I said no. And I think I want to go back and ask her for it. But I did send her an email later and said to her, "You're the first person," and I'm going to choke up a little bit, even including my family and friends who I've told this to, and you just received it. And then when we had staff training, she was talking about what official diagnosis and lived experience. And they talked about people who are older who have never had a diagnosis. And I just love that idea. It's like, it's enough that I know that I've lived it. I don't have to make it my whole personality. I don't have to spend a day at a psychiatrist's office. I don't have to get medication. It's just enough to know that this might be an issue for me. That has been enough for me to go through a whole bunch of stuff that I needed to go through, and to understand that the way my life was when I was a little girl changed me, changed my brain. And it made it great in ways, and it made it harder in ways, and it just made me me. So again, I would love to hear about it if you're going through something like this. I'd like to know what your questions are, who I should interview, how I should approach it. And I hope this has helped a little bit. And uh, yeah, let's be correct about our words out there. Let's all try to double check what we say. And I'm speaking mostly to people in the menopause community who are sharing content, not to people listening to this podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. It means the world to me. Send me a text if you have a tag. Send me an email at amcqueen@hotflashinc.com. And I'll see you next week.
Hot Flash Inc. was created and is hosted by Ann Marie McQueen, produced and edited by Sonia Mack. The information contained in this podcast is intended for informational purposes only and is not intended for the purpose of diagnosing, treating, curing, or preventing any disease. Before using any products referenced on the podcast, consult with your healthcare provider, read all labels, and heed all directions and cautions that accompany the products. Information received through the podcast should not be used in place of a consultation or advice from a healthcare provider. If you suspect you have a medical problem, i.e. menopause or anything else, or any healthcare questions, please promptly see your healthcare provider. This podcast, including Ann Marie McQueen and any producers or editors, disclaim any responsibility from any possible adverse effects from the use of any information contained herein. Opinions of guests on this podcast are their own, and the podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about a guest's qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements and advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. This podcast is owned by Hot Flash Inc. Media.